Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, "You're too arrogant. And if you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power."
Bow, 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 bow.
Hotep, which in the language of ancient Egypt means we come with justice in peace. Welcome to Freedom Now, a Saturday Pan-Africanist and Internationalist World Affairs program. Freedom Now is committed to the principle of the rights of all peoples and nations to self-determination. We thank you deeply for your contribution to KPFK, which permits programs like Freedom Now to stay on the air. In this era of corporate acquisition and co-optation of all dissident media, we provide the microphone, challenging their corporate and racist point of view. So stay tuned for our agenda here at Freedom Now.
Habari Gani. This is Sister Tej with Freedom Now's agenda for the week of September 20th, 2025. Today's central theme is Black Feminism and Leadership. We commence today's program with our Sister Ileana Nachescu and the African Drumbeat Historical Calendar. Then, prolific author, radical historian, professor of African American Studies at the University of Houston, and Freedom Now co-producer, Dr. Gerald Horne interviews Dr. Ileana Nachescu, Associate Teaching Professor in Women's and Gender Studies at Rutgers University, here to discuss her book, The National Alliance of Black Feminists. And later in the hour, I interview Dr. Helena Jeffrey Brown, a leading Black woman in ocean diplomacy, serving as a program director of the OECS Commission, that's the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. She joins us to discuss what's happening in the Caribbean in light of the recent Third United Nations Oceans Conference in Nice, France. And so as we're on the topic of our oceans, and Trump has illegal military operations in international Caribbean waters, pay attention to yesterday's New York Times article announcing the High Seas Treaty. It's a treaty that allows for establishing vast conservation zones in international waters. And the treaty states a goal of giving 30% of the high seas some kind of protected status by the year 2030. The United Nations Special Envoy from France, Olivier Poivre-Davor, he's the top negotiator from France, and he said in the article, quote, "Macron told all our ambassadors to take this as seriously as the war in Ukraine from a diplomatic standpoint," end quote. Take from that what you will. And also be mindful that France gave Ukraine over $5 billion over about a year and a half period up until the end of 2024. But I raise this here because I met Mr. Olivier Poivre-Davor at the United Nations Oceans Conference in Nice, France, because he answered my question at the closing press conference about what message he has for the youth. And it's important to share this here on Freedom Now because it was a grim one if we don't act, but here it is. That due to unsustainable fossil fuel extraction, the world now faces the possibility of a +4 degree temperature rise and a 1.5 meter sea level increase by the end of the century, which is just 75 years away. And so youth in the coastal and island communities are key to ocean stewardship. And for context, +2 degrees could lead to 99% coral loss. So we're looking at that in 40 years. So what's going to happen? What's going to be there for our babies? We need to act. So you definitely don't want to miss the calls from our Caribbean family during this Freedom Now hour. Our music clip mix includes MLK, Zap Mama, Michael Jackson, Madison Cali, Alice Coltrane, Ravon Steely Roden, Regina Carter, Esperanza Spalding, and more. So sit back, phone a friend, and as always, we stand ready for revolution.
Hotep. This is Sister Luyanda Koboka with Freedom Now's weekly African drumbeat historical calendar for the week of September 19th. This calendar is presented to provide historical continuity to the ongoing struggle of the oppressed, so that we may take heart from the bygone struggles of our ancestors. September 20th, 1918. Mary Huang Choi was born. She was a leader of the movement to bring the United States and the state of Hawaii to trial for crimes committed against the indigenous people of Hawaii. She was a militant supporter of independence for the Hawaiian nation, which include complete control over their land and resources. September 21st, 1926. Reyes Lopez Tijerina, a one-time minister and traveling revivalist, was born. Tijerina and his Federal Land Grant Alliance were the vanguard of the effort to reclaim stolen Mexican land, and in the process seized and occupied a courthouse and consistently challenged the United States national authorities. His autobiography, They Call Me King Tiger, is considered the Bible for the militant aspect of the Chicano movement. September 22nd, 1964. Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, known as the Rebel Girl, was a socialist union organizer, Irish-American professional revolutionary, and founder of the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, who later ousted her for being a communist. She was a militant organizer, prolific essayist, and popular speaker who was the founding organizer of the Workers' Defense League and became the first woman to lead the Communist Party in the United States. September 22nd, 1960. Mali gains independence from French colonialism under the leadership of the revolutionary Pan-Africanist Modibo Keïta. Mali was the center of the first university in the world, Timbuktu. Mali, together with Ghana, Guinea, Egypt, Tanzania, and Algeria, formed the Casablanca bloc of anti-imperialist countries in Africa. September 22nd, 1941. George Jackson, leader of the Black Panther Party within the prison system, was born. Author of Soledad Brothers and Blood in My Eye, George was the charismatic leader of the revolutionary forces within the California prison system, who tied racism with capitalism and the alternative of scientific socialism. Brother Jackson's analysis and activism sparked the spread of prison struggles throughout the country. His assassination by prison guards sparked off the Attica State Prison uprising, prompting the bloodiest suppression of inmates in U.S. history. September 23, 1904. Mariana Braceri, a revolutionary Puerto Rican independence fighter and leader of the September 23, 1868 Grito de Lares uprising, crosses over. She designed the first flag of independence. September 23, 1926. John Coltrane, considered the greatest jazz musician of all time, was born. John Coltrane was known for using the 3-on-1 chord approach and playing multiple notes at one time. In 1960, Coltrane formed his own quartet and created the most innovative and expressive music in jazz history, including the albums My Favorite Things, Africa Brass, Impressions, Giant Steps, and the greatest jazz album of all, A Love Supreme. Coltrane was the musical spiritual godhead of the Black Power movement. September 24, 1974. Guinea-Bissau gains independence after 350 years of Portuguese colonialism. The liberation of Guinea-Bissau under the leadership of socialist PAIGC, Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau of Cape Verde, was led by Amilcar Cabral. September 24, 1957. 9 African high school students under the threat of assassination integrate Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, after centuries of denial of access to equal education. September 24, 1825. Frances E.W. Harper, aka Red Mulatto, because of her mixed Native American and African ancestry, was born. She was a prolific writer, an anti-slavery activist, and women's rights advocate. She popularized the use of Ebonics in her poetry and speeches. September 25th, 1995. Annie Bessie Delaney crosses over. She was the second African woman in the U.S. to practice dentistry in New York, who more often than not dispensed free dental care to members of the African community. Her office became a central meeting place for activists and revolutionaries. September 25th, 1964. Mozambique gains independence after 350 years of struggle against Portuguese colonialism, sustained by the United States and Western Europe colonial powers. This has been African Drumbeat Historical Calendar here at Freedom Now on KPFK 90.7 FM in Southern California and 98.7 FM in Central California, and live on the web at kpfk.org. Please join us in the chant of liberation, Amandla Awetu, which means the power is ours. Amandla Awetu, Amandla Awetu, Amandla Awetu.
For KPFK Los Angeles, this is Gerald Horne, and with me on the line is Ileana Nachescu, Associate Teaching Professor at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and author of the book, The National Alliance of Black Feminists, A History. Thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK Los Angeles, Professor Nachescu.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
And we're thrilled to have you. So what was the National Alliance of Black Feminists, and why did you decide to write a book about this group?
The National Alliance of Black Feminists was a very long-living, very active Black feminist organization that started in Chicago in 1975 as an offshoot of the National Black Feminist Organization. This was a shorter-lived effort that was centered in New York, but quickly developed local chapters around the country. And one of the most notable, among the most notable ones, are the National Alliance of Black Feminists in Chicago and the Combahee River Collective in Boston. There are a lot of other local branches whose history is yet to be written, but that was sort of like a testimony to the fact that in the mid-1970s, as the women's liberation movement was in full swing, Black women were interested and very, very passionate about feminism, and whether they embraced the label or not, because there's a complicated discussion there, but that was actually happening, and the Black women's liberation movement was happening at the time. I was interested in the National Alliance of Black Feminists because I felt that it needed more of a scholarly documentation. I felt that people needed to learn more about it, to know more about it, beyond the, like occasional chapter or paragraph in a chapter that had been produced by scholars up until then. Once I went to Chicago and at the Chicago History Museum and at the Vivian G. Harsh Carter G. Woodson Library, I saw the archives. They're very, very rich archives, which are the result of Brenda Eichelberger, the organization's executive director, literally keeping everything. So these amazing archives, I felt that they totally deserved a monograph, the organization needed to be documented. People needed to know more about that. I was utterly convinced about that, and I still am. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So what was the Equal Rights Amendment, and what role did it play within the Alliance of Black Feminists?
Well, if you're asking right now, is gender equality guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution? The answer is, of course, No, right? All men are created equal, but gender equality is nowhere in the Constitution. And the Equal Rights Amendment was an effort. It originally started in 1924, actually, right after women won the right to vote. So every 4 years, the National Woman Party, a mostly white women's organization, reintroduced it in Congress. It was more like a pressure group in Washington, D.C. It introduced the Equal Rights Amendment in Congress, and of course, it never went very far. Now, with the women's liberation movement on the horizon, late 1960s, early 1970s, this emerges as a goal of the women's liberation movement. And it galvanized a lot of efforts everywhere around the country. Ratification, when initially they didn't get enough states for ratification, then it was extended until 1982, and Illinois was definitely a battleground state. Illinois itself had not ratified the Equal Rights Amendment. It seemed like it was on track to be ratified by the number of states needed to be ratified until Phyllis Schlafly started Stop ERA, Stop the Equal Rights Amendment. And this was an organization that she founded, again, interestingly, out of Illinois again, and it became a national organization, and actually it was in a way successful alongside more conservative activism that was successful in stopping the Equal Rights Amendment. One of the arguments that I'm making in the book, it refers to Black women's passionate support for the Equal Rights Amendment. Brenda Eichelberger and her colleagues at the National Alliance of Black Feminists were incredibly active in organizing for the passing of ERA. They were part of coalitions that were trying to fight for Illinois to ratify the amendment. In the end, that did not happen, and they were defeated. But a part of history that's kind of missing in the history of the women's liberation movement is Black women's activism for the passing of the Equal Rights Amendment. And I think that's really important. And here, the National Alliance of Black Feminists shines in the sense that not only did they organize various events and they participated in a lot of coalitions, for Illinois to ratify and for the nation in general to pass the Equal Rights Amendment, but at the same time they also wrote a position paper, the missing link to passing the Equal Rights Amendment, that I think to this day would be a very interesting document about building political coalitions that I think was also at the core of the NABF philosophy.
Mm-hmm. So you say that the Alliance of Black Feminists was based in Chicago. Was there any influence in the Golden State in California?
They were aware of the Third World Women's Alliance that had chapters in California, and of other Black feminist organizations from California. The National Alliance of Black Feminists was in Chicago, and although they called themselves national, and they definitely had national ambitions, they wanted to be the leader of a national Black women's liberation movement. In the end, they ended up being mostly a regional organization, and they had chapters in Detroit. They had chapters in Albany. They had chapters in St. Louis. So they also had a subsidiary in Denver, and that was so it kind of covers the Midwest in many ways, and that sort of helps you make an argument about the geographic continuity of Black women's liberation movement. So in other words, Black women were active in the women's liberation movement, some identifying as feminists, others doing gender justice work, but not embracing the label. From the East Coast to the West Coast, from North to South, we can see, if we look at the map, that there were Black feminist organizations or Black women's liberation organizations pretty much everywhere. in the country, and I think that's one of the arguments that I also make in the book, that there was a Black women's liberation movement unfolding at the same time, and at the same time as separately from the women's liberation movement that was happening at the time.
So what do you mean by Anglo-China-phobia?
This is not a word that I invented. This is what Brenda Eichelberger, the executive director of the National Alliance of Black Feminists, who was a theorist herself, and she wrote many, many articles. She had many book projects. She hoped to put together a collection of essays written by Black feminists. That project did not come to fruition, but we still have about 10 articles written by her and her collaborators, and spread out through movement publications. So she invented the Anglo-gynophobia as the Black women's, so if we take it separately word by word, prefix by prefix, right? Anglo white women, gynophobia, meaning the phobia or distrust or fear or hatred of Black women. And Brenda Eichelberger neologized and created that term to sort of identify what she saw as a problem in the movement, as Black women being distrustful of white women's supposedly good intentions in the movement toward them, and preferring to organize on their own. As a result of that, Brenda was a huge believer in coalition. She constantly fought and built coalitions with all sorts of groups, other women of color groups in Chicago, white feminist groups, pretty much everywhere, all around the country. However, the fact that there was racism within the women's liberation movement was undeniable, and she herself had that experience herself. Oftentimes, Black women were invited as participants in events, but they could not take leadership, or they could not be main speakers, or their perspectives would not be centered, and because oftentimes, of course, like Black women speaking about feminism, of course, race was a huge part of the conversation. Race could not be erased from the conversation, and this was something that white women did not want to hear. Some white feminists at that time. I have to say that, this is not necessarily true about the entirety of the women's liberation movement, that certain circles were more open toward having a perhaps sometimes uncomfortable dialogue about race than others. So Brenda Eichelberger, who had been at that time, she had been in the movement active in the movement for 4 years when she wrote that, and she had a lot of experience moderating groups of Black women, groups of Black and white women working together. And she was trying to write an article in which she was saying, look, we really need to work together, but let's look at the reasons why Black women are not trusting white women's stated good intentions. Let's have a look at that, and let's look at all the causes. And she listed quite a few ways in which Black women were marginalized or tokenized, or other histories of racial oppression that, of course, had also a gender dimension. And she wrote a series of articles for a lesbian publication called Women's News for a Change out of Chicago. This publication was short-lived. In many ways, the publishers themselves, I'm sure, were struggling financially, and they were struggling to put out the paper. Of course, at some point, I think they decided to cut the series short in a way that amounted, in my reading and as well as in Brenda Eichelberger's interpretation, to censorship. She was told that she had one more, they did not have space anymore for her series, and that she would she would be allowed to publish one more essay in the series, and then that was it. That, of course, felt very hurtful and in many ways disappointing. This was not a unique experience for Black women trying to publish in the women's liberation movement, as, for example, Barbara Smith remembers. Barbara Smith, the founder of Kitchen Table Press, Women of Color Press, that was created especially to publish women of color feminist essays and articles and research projects. And they also had this experience of struggling to publish what they wanted to say, what they really truly wanted to say, when they collaborated with white feminists. So they chose to start their own press. That was in 1983. By that time, the National Alliance of Black Feminists did not exist anymore. But Brenda Eichelberger had this experience of censorship. And as a result, their next paper, they just simply self-published their next paper, which was the missing link to the passing of the Equal Rights Amendment. That was a position paper that they simply self-published. They did not look for publishers anymore, and I think that was because of the experience that they had had before with Women's News for a Change.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the Combahee River Collective. What was it? What is it?
Oh, the Combahee River Collective. I would like to warmly invite right now your readers to just Google it like really fast, because it is one of the most, to me, as a feminist, it is one of the most interesting and the most theoretical and the most radical and the most, you go ahead and list your favorite adjectives when describing social movements. A group in I think the whole of 20th century, their Black feminist statement represents, to me, even now, I don't know, what is this, like 60 years later? They published it in 1976 or 77, I think. So no, 50 years later. It's still one of the most radical and far-reaching documents that talks about race and class and gender and sexuality, but they also speak, and they coined the term identity politics. This is also worth mentioning, because they came up with the term identity politics, and this has become, like so widely used, and I would argue so extremely misunderstood in a lot of contexts. And I think that rereading the Combahee River Collective's Black feminist statement is one way of sort of clarifying ideas. So in addition, I would like to say that identity politics, as they defined it, in addition to talking about gender and race, class and sexuality, they also identify themselves as socialists and anti-imperialists. And I think this is a really important aspect of identity politics that is sometimes overlooked in the way the term has been mainstreamed. There are, of course, scholars who have discussed this, the Black feminist statement from the point of view of a political philosophy. And I think that's really important to take that document seriously, and the Combahee River Collective more generally as the, like an example and a historical model for what is possible within activism and for how radical our vision can be.
Just to clarify, this term identity politics, which has taken on a kind of negative connotation, you're suggesting that the Combahee River Collective, when they formulated this concept, they were not using it in a negative sense. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. It was extremely positive. It was radical. They were trying to craft the politics out of their own experience. And they were saying, we derive our politics out of our own identities. And I think this is a semi-exact quote. And I think that's really important to know. Yes, of course, our experiences can and should influence our politics. That does not exclude, of course, like engaging with theory or creating theory based on our experiences. But this is part of a larger sort of argument made starting with the civil rights movement, and then of course Black Power, and then of course women's liberation movement, which many, especially which derived a lot of its organizing tactics and philosophy from Black Power and the civil rights movement. This idea that experiences should influence our politics is very important.
So how and why was the Alliance of Black Feminists role erased?
It's a very good question and something that I puzzled with over the years. I think in general, there was this assumption in historiography that Black women would, in feminist historiography, that Black women would be organizing in the 1970s, late 60s and mid 70s, but they would not be interested in feminism because feminism had appropriated, especially the white women's liberation movement, had appropriated so many tactics and ideas, and even the iconography. If we think about the symbol for the women's liberation, which is a clenched fist in the biological symbol for female. The clenched fist, of course, is the Black Power symbol. So many Black women felt, that feminism is the way Toni Morrison put it in 1970 in her article, "What the Black Woman Thinks About Women's Lib," which is basically she said there that a lot of Black women saw it as a family argument between Black women, between white women and men, right? Although towards the end, it's worth, this article seems very harsh toward women's liberation, and is very sort of open in its assertion of Black women's experiences of racism from white women as much as from white men. But at the same time, she was saying, look, in the women's liberation movement, there are also Black feminist organizers, such as Shirley Chisholm, trying to remember others who were mobilized at that time, and that there is, the women's liberation movement definitely had, even as early as 1970, the potential for Black women to be way more than a family quarrel between white women and white men. And I think she ends the article something like, "The air is shivering with possibilities." And if we think about, Toni Morrison expressing something, as powerfully as she does, usually I think that's a good assessment of that.
Finally, Ileana Nachescu, author of the book, The National Alliance of Black Feminists, A History. How does your work correspond with that of Kimberly Springer's book, Living for the Revolution, Black Feminist Organizations, 1968 to 1980?
Kimberly Springer sort of mapped out the National Alliance of Black Feminists first, and she and Benita Roth and a couple of other, and Duchess Harris as well. And I am incredibly grateful for the work that she did in sort of laying the groundwork for a history of Black feminism, but taken on its own terms. In many ways, histories of the women's movement have been written from the perspective of white women, and she made, alongside Benita Roth, she made the argument that these movements also had deep roots and deep connections with Black Power, with civil rights organizations, and their assessment of race was truly, we cannot dissociate, we cannot think of Black feminism without seriously thinking what it meant to be a Black woman in that time. So her work is, I think I quote her a lot in my work, and it's really one of the works that allowed me to sort of move forward with my own argument from here.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, Professor Nachescu, but thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK, Los Angeles.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is Sister Flora, and you are listening to Freedom Now at KPFK 90.7 FM in occupied Mexico, including Los Angeles, 98.7 FM Santa Barbara, 93.7 FM in San Diego, and streaming live on the web at kpfk.org. Today's program, as well as 10 prior editions, can be reheard at kpfk.org/audio archive, and scroll down to Freedom Now. For a truly alternative international perspective on world affairs, check out RTTV Russia, CCTV China, and online at Presna, Latina Cuba Telesur Venezuela, News 24 South Africa, and Press TV Iran.
This is Sister Tej with Freedom Now here on KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles, where liberation meets analysis, and we keep our eyes on the pulse of global justice. We're so honored to welcome a distinguished guest to the program today, Dr. Helena Jeffrey Brown. She's a leading voice on sustainable development and climate resilience in the Caribbean region. Dr. Jeffrey Brown serves with the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Commission, the OECS Commission, as a program director for biodiversity, ecosystems, and ecosystem services in the Environmental Sustainability Division, where she's been instrumental in shaping regional environmental policy and advocating for the small island developing states on the global stage. And I recently had the privilege of joining Dr. Jeffrey Brown's sessions at the Third United Nations Oceans Conference, where voices from around the world gathered to confront escalating crises facing our oceans, from climate justice to marine biodiversity, and from the blue economy to indigenous stewardship. These are not just buzzwords, but lifelines for frontline nations like those of the Eastern Caribbean. It's such an honor to welcome you to Freedom Now, Dr. Helena Jeffrey Brown.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and it's good to see you again, and to have a conversation with you where others can listen in and perhaps learn something. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So, as we jump right into it, you've emerged as a leading voice in Caribbean marine science and policy, advocating for ocean justice, sustainable finance, and stronger regional leadership. And so what inspired your journey from a young girl in the Eastern Caribbean to one of the most respected Black women in ocean diplomacy today?
Well, as somebody from the Caribbean, the ocean is part of everything. It's part of our lives, part of our culture. It's what you are exposed to from the day you're born, and it becomes part of you. It's when I travel on for these long meetings, I need to see the sea to orient myself. So I have people send me pictures and videos so I can reorient myself, because some of the small island states, especially from the Caribbean, the sea, the beach, it's all part of our psyche. It's difficult to think of life without it. So therefore, having it as such a part of my in my informative years, having it as such a strong part in how I grew up, and this is the same for most of the people within the Caribbean, having such a strong part of how we interact with one another. It's only natural that then you would want to make sure that you can do everything in your power to conserve it, to preserve it, to make sure that it remains as a valuable resource for the generations to come. The OECS is in the Eastern Caribbean, and we have 12 member states, all extending from St. Martin right down to Grenada. And it's 12 of us member states, and we really work hard to make sure we have environmental sustainability, and that we have full integration of the work that we do.
Inspiring already. And recently, at the United Nations Oceans Conference in Nice, France, you helped convene high-level conversations on sustainable ocean financing for small island developing states. And we're wondering, why is finance such a critical frontier in ocean protection? And how are Caribbean leaders like yourself reshaping the narrative to ensure that these solutions are equitable, regionally led, and responsive to the real needs on the ground?
Okay, so sustainable financing, these mechanisms are crucial. Without them, we are not unable to manage our ocean resources into the long term, into the future. We have to make sure that we have sustained funding. And in the past, we have lost our funding so many times that we realize that we cannot continue in that way. We have to find new innovative ways to ensure that the financing we receive is sustainable into the future, to make sure that in our intentional conservation efforts can be effectively implemented, because without sustainable financing, then it's difficult to be sure that the work that we're doing will not be for naught. It's so important that we make sure that we work towards getting these mechanisms in place. The Caribbean is highly dependent on our healthy marine ecosystems for our livelihoods. There's no plan B for us. We depend on it for our livelihoods, for our food security, for climate resilience. We face a unique vulnerability. I was discussing this with a colleague of mine earlier, and there's a storm that we're watching. We're hopeful that it will turn and will not affect us, because if we get blindsided by one of these category 5 storms, then we're back 10 years, and we can't afford that. We're so vulnerable. We have to ensure that whatever we do, the hard work that we do in conservation, in management of oceans, has a foreseeable future, has a sustainable financial mechanism associated with it, so that we can maintain this into the future. So one of the things that we're doing is we have our OECS 30 by 30 transformational program, where we intend to create a regional conservation center that will not only coordinate the work of conservation, of management, of bridging the gap between global financing mechanisms and local realities, but will also help align the donors, making sure that the funding is not used, the work is not duplicated, making sure that the funding is aligned with the strengths of the different folks, the different kinds of work within the region. We don't need to duplicate efforts. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to build on the work that's being done by the various entities. And there's so many entities, great entities, so many strategic partners we are working with in the region that bring to the table such rich collaborative efforts. And we have to have a mechanism, have a conservation center that helps align the donors, helps align the work, help coordinate this work, and also seeks to create new and innovative financing mechanisms so that we can support continually the work into the future, so that we have sustainable oceans, sustainable marine ecosystems that help us to thrive and to live long, healthy lives without being, so we're more resilient to climate change, we're more resilient to the changes and devastation that we see so often. So it's so important. I can't even stress how important that is. So we're working hard to make sure our regional conservation center is strong and sustainable, and that we have ways for the future to maintain our work, all the hard work that we are doing in the region, through the NGOs, through the governments, through all the agencies that work in this area.
I have a follow-up question about that.
Sure.
So outside of the Eastern Caribbean, which governments or nations support the Eastern Caribbean states more regularly or the most internationally?
I guess it varies. It varies. It comes from everywhere. And I guess it depends on the work. It depends on the work and where you can get. But it's not necessarily governments. It's more philanthropies. It's more, yes, there's the international GEFs, the global and environment facilities of the world, and then the GBFFs. That's the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, and then there are all the usual ways. But we're going to the private sector under the UN Convention on Biodiversity. we have found that it is the private sector that we need to tap into. We've been tapping into, the old resources forever, or for time immemorial. But I think it's time that we realize that everyone has a part to play. The private sector that has been, everybody uses the environment for various activities, for various work, and it's time that we make sure that how we move forward is that we build that resilience. It's time that we know that everybody, private sector, individuals, governments, NGOs, everybody has a part to play. So we are trying to figure out how can we have these innovative finance mechanisms which include everybody into this, not only the governments, not only the NGOs, not only the private sector, but the individuals, to see how it is we can work together to find ways that we can get these mechanisms so that they're sustainable. Maybe looking at insurance, maybe looking at the other possible ways.
Thank you. And so at the United Nations Oceans Conference, one of the key messages from the Caribbean was that regional coordination that you were just talking about through tools like the Ocean Coordination Mechanism and the Actioning Blue Declaration, that they're essential to turning global ambition into real results. And so can you give our listeners some background and share how the Ocean Coordination Mechanism and the Actioning Blue Declaration work, and why collaborations across these governments, like you were just talking about, with funders, local communities, is so important right now, especially as we're pushing towards what is known as the 30 by 30 biodiversity goal?
Right. So for those who don't know, what is this 30 by 30 thing? Now let's start there. So the idea is by 2030, the globe will protect 30% of its marine resources and its terrestrial resources. So by 2030, 30% of the world will be under some sort of protection. Now, the Caribbean, under the Actioning Blue, it's the idea that we as a Caribbean, we will have 30% of our marine space protected, having some sort of protection on it, so that we ensure that there is resilience and that there's rebounding of the biodiversity within that helps ensure that our ecosystems are now stronger, more resilient to the storms that constantly pass through, that's more resilient to pollution, invasives, all the big drivers of biodiversity loss. And as we know, the sea has no boundaries. We can't put up fences and say, okay, this is my area, I'll protect it, and then for next, my neighbor can do whatever. That doesn't work. And what we do in one area affects directly our neighbors. So we have to do it as a neighbor, as a region, all together, protecting it to make sure that we're keeping out our invasives and making sure that we're managing our pollution, to making sure that we're handling all of the big drivers of biodiversity loss. So it's important to coordinate with our neighboring countries to have effective and efficient management of our ocean space. This Caribbean Ocean Coordinating Mechanism that we talked about is a system that helps facilitate coordination among all the Caribbean countries, all of them, not only the OECS, but the whole of the Caribbean. And this coordination mechanism supports integrated oceans governance in the Caribbean and North Brazil Shelf large marine ecosystem. This is a permanent coordination mechanism, and it seeks to strengthen collaboration among countries and among organizations to collectively achieve and safeguard healthy marine and coastal ecosystems as a key driver, of course, for well-being, for thriving and sustainable and resilient ocean-based economies, of course, in the wider region. Because I said before, we don't have a plan B. This is it. We depend on our oceans for everything. And it's important for our lives and for our future generations that we have resilient oceans that are protected. And we're doing this together as a region, because it doesn't make sense working as in silos. Silos, they've never worked. And it's really important to get together and make this aspect of our lives, thrive. Yes.
And so beyond science and policy, your work emphasizes mentorship and the need to decolonize access to environmental leadership. And so, for our listeners, can you talk about what opportunities exist for young Black people in the ocean space, not just in labs or governments, but across art, activism, tech, and even storytelling?
Right. So, yes, so yeah, I'm science-based. I'm saying, what are you talking about? Not labs. Well, no. No, but the creative side of me is saying, hey, but there's a whole world out there of creatives who talk about the ocean. We have such a rich history. For example, the Nobel laureate Derek Walcott from St. Lucia, many of his poems and plays and stories are actually centered around the sea. Artists, they're key to telling the stories and getting people to listen to meaningful messages. We've seen this in our fight against plastics, especially ocean polluting plastics. We have a music video entitled More Than Just Lands. You can access that through our OECS YouTube channel, where 7 Caribbean artists came together to deliver powerful messages to help fight against plastic pollution. In addition, we have several youngsters have joined the messaging with their spoken word pieces, with mixed media and other art forms. So it is key. It attracts people. So, the folks who are not in the science base and they don't necessarily want to work in there, but you as a creative person, just being there to the ocean, allows that creative side to come up with you. And for some reason, we've seen so many examples of great poems and plays and music just coming from based on the ocean, based on the movement of the ocean. Have you ever seen a beautiful painting where they've captured the water just right? You can't tear your eyes away from that. I always look for that. I always look for pieces of art where they capture the water just perfectly, because to me that's more. I can't even begin to speak about how that touches me. And so for me, I think to have a true just future where everybody's in part of this, it's important that we engage with our communities. It's important that we have all individuals involved, because I think before in this fight to reverse biodiversity loss, we just stuck with the science, and that did not work. We have to get to the point where everybody, we speak to all individuals, because all of us have a part to play. It's when everybody realizes that, hey, my decisions can affect the ocean. Wherever I live, how you decide to dispose of your trash, how you decide what your footprint is, affects the ocean, because it all will flush into the ocean at some point. And so we have to be careful. We have to make decisions as an individual in every aspect of our lives to realize that what we do will affect everything around us. And if we don't take responsibility for this, we will just continue polluting and destroying the oceans that we don't want to do. So it's important that at the individual level, the community level, we speak to one another and we speak about what's important and what decisions that we can make that will help reduce pollution, improve our environment, make sure that we keep our ecosystem strong and resilient. Because it is those everyday decisions that have dramatic effects on the ocean and marine life.
And we actually want to continue with our last question into that messaging for the youth. What message do you have and advice specifically for the Black youth who want to follow in your footsteps, who may not yet see themselves in this kind of work yet, even after all that you just presented?
Yeah, because we've spoken to many students before, and to me, it's all about getting out there, because I am a teacher as well. I believe in encouraging whomever it is. If your background is just you have to be inside, no, you need to get outside, be involved, join a group that picks up trash, volunteer with an environmental NGO and be part of conservation. In the Caribbean, it's very easy to get involved because there's always a turtle conservation thing that you can join, or you can go clean up beaches in landlocked places. There are other things that people can do, yes, such as cleaning up areas, such as gardening, getting yourself in touch with the environment around you and finding a way to conserve, finding a way to reduce the pollution that's put out there, finding a way that you can connect, in this case, to the ocean, because and marine life. Maybe do, we have so many people who can't go to the ocean. There are ways of visiting the ocean virtually, and maybe supporting those folks who are out there, supporting them financially, support how out there doing the trips and then doing research underwater, so they can share this and we can understand what's happening with different species, so we can use this information to help conserve and improve our habitats. And so my final message is get involved, do something, figure out, join a group, help clean up waste. Be an activist with regards to the environment, because environment is not something I'm telling you to protect for me. I'm saying let everybody get involved so that we all can make our lives better, our children's lives better, a better future where we have a strong, resilient environment, beautiful oceans that are providing us with food and security and livelihoods. Because this is how we survive. This is how we do well. This is how we improve the work that we do. And this is how we have a strong, healthy environment that's great for everybody, with fresh air, beautiful sparkling water to swim in and to get your food from, and to get your livelihood secure. We don't have a plan B. There's no second Earth out there somewhere looking for us. No, we have to improve our environment. We have to make sure that the work that we do is measured. Decisions that we make are future oriented, to think that what is the effect of this decision on the future, on the environment. Let's make those, let's think carefully about what we're doing. Because when you start that as a young person, when you become an adult, it's hard for you to want to just throw things out the window or throw things into the sea. It's hard because you say, but no, if I do this, it's going to affect these sea creatures, this marine life. It's gonna clog our mangroves. It's gonna do this. You'll know because you've been exposed firsthand to the effect of polluting, to the effect of common decisions that people might make that will affect our environment. So just get out there, do something, go online, join groups who can help guide you, hike, swim, be out there, be part of nature, because it has so much to offer, and we have to be involved in this process of preserving our environment so that we have a strong future for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Jeffrey Brown, if people wanted to learn more, where can they find more information?
Well, you can go to the OECS website. It's www.oecs.int. But we also have an OECS YouTube channel. So I'd invite you to go to it and look at all the videos, because we have many videos of all the projects that we're working on, all the conservation work that we do, because we are representative of the member states. And the member states have done so much work. We have several projects within there and we emphasize this. We emphasize this work. In terms of biodiversity, we talk about, the training that we're doing within the region. But there are several projects like Biospace and ILM. We have trained foresters. We have trained people who manage protected areas. We have trained, they get to go to do courses. They do real courses. Some come out with their masters, some come out with their certificates, so that they have education and to be able to make a difference in how we manage our environment. So OECS has done quite a bit of work in training, quite a bit of work in project management, so that at the end of the day, we have a strong, resilient region, Eastern Caribbean region, where our biodiversity thrives, where our ecosystems are strong and robust, and we have a better future for our children and future generations.
Well, we thank you so much, Dr. Helena Jeffrey Brown, Program Director with the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Commission. Thank you so much for your time with us today on Freedom Now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you and for your listeners to hear about us and the OECS. And we would invite you to come visit us, Thank you.
Thank you. So our listeners heard the invite themselves. Thank you. And in closing, we'd like to thank our guests. Thank you, Dr. Ileana Nachescu. Thank you, Dr. Helena Jeffrey Brown. Thank you to our producers, Dr. Gerald Horne, Sister Flora, Sister Femi, Brother Brandon. Thank you, Brother Anthony Ballas. Thank you, Wendell Handy. Thank you, Mark Maxwell, and all those who made today's program possible. This program, as well as prior programs, can be reheard for the next 60 days. You can go to kpfk.org, audio archives, scroll to Freedom Now, and if you have any show ideas or feedback, please feel free to email us at freedomnow@kpfk.org. Signing off for Freedom Now this week, this is Sister Tej, and until next week, as always, we stand ready for revolution.
We state these facts only to let you know that those of us who are revolutionary, Pan-Africanists, is not because we love revolution. It is historically determined, and we have no alternative but to follow history and to use history for the benefit of our people.
Power to the people.